The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The dunes sea at midday. The twin suns hang motionless at their zenith, bleaching the sky to the color of old bone. The sand stretches in every direction without mercy. No shadow, no landmark, no horizon that promises anything different on the other side. 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker runs. Not from anything. Not toward anything. That is the problem. The womp rat he'd been tracking for the last hour had vanished into a rock shelf 2 kilometers back, and now he is simply running because stopping means going home. And home means the slave quarters, and the slave quarters mean the collar around his neck, even when no one is looking at it. He runs because his legs work and the desert doesn't care who owns him. He nearly trips over her. She is sitting in the shadow of a collapsed sandstone formation, a compression of rock that juts from the dune at a wrong angle, as though the desert itself tried to swallow something ancient and couldn't finish the job. She is old, impossibly old. Robes the color of ash and old blood wrap her frame in layers that somehow exist outside the heat. Her eyes are closed, which is the first strange thing. The second strange thing is that she has no water. Anakin stops 3 meters away. His chest heaves. He looks at her the way he looks at broken machinery, assessing, already cataloging what's wrong. "You're going to die out here," he says. "There's no water for 6 kilometers, and the temperature hits 50 before third bell." The old woman does not open her eyes. "And yet," she says, "here I am." Her voice is low and precise. It carries without effort across the furnace air, intimate in a way that has nothing to do with volume. Anakin has heard Watto talk about the Hutts with that kind of voice, the voice of someone who has never needed to raise it. "I mean it. People die out here every season." "People," she says, as though the word is a specimen she is turning over in her fingers, "die everywhere." The dune sea is merely more honest about it than most places. Now she opens her eyes. Or rather, she turns her face toward him. Where her eyes should be there is only scar tissue, smooth and deliberate, the skin long healed over 2 hollow spaces. "Sit down, boy." Anakin does not sit down. "You're blind." "I am aware." "How did you find shade if you're blind?" For the first time, something moves at the corner of her mouth. It is not quite a smile. "How did you find me?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. The honest answer is that he felt her before he saw her, a pressure in the air around the rock formation, the way the atmosphere sometimes thickens before a sandstorm, except there is no storm. He has felt things like that his whole life and never had a word for it. He does not give her the honest answer because he has learned living in Mos Espa that honest answers are a form of currency and you don't spend currency on strangers. "Luck," he says. "No," she says. "Try again." The pressure in the air intensifies slightly. Not threateningly, it is more like someone adjusting the focus on a lens. Anakin's skin prickles from the back of his neck to his wrists. "What are you doing?" he asks. "Listening," she says. "You are extraordinarily loud, child, to those who know how to hear." She tilts her head a fraction. 9 years old. Owned by a Toydarian. Mother alive. Which is the only thing in your life that functions as an anchor. You build things because the act of building gives you the illusion of agency over a world that has given you none. And you have been running for 40 minutes, not because you enjoy running, but because you cannot tolerate stillness. Anakin says nothing for a long moment. "That's not listening," he finally says. "That's guessing." "Then I am a very accurate guesser." "Sit down." This time he sits. The shadow of the rock formation is not adequate for 2 people, and Anakin is closer to the sun than she is. But he doesn't move. He watches her the way he watches Watto count credits, looking for the mechanism behind the performance. "What's your name?" he asks. "What do names cost you, in this place?" "Nothing." "Then they are worth nothing." Names are handles people put on things they wish to control. She pauses. "You may call me Kreia. It is what I was called when I last walked a world that no longer exists." "Where are you from?" "Far away." and long ago. She says it without mysticism, as a simple statement of fact. I have been sleeping beneath this sand, in a room built by people who believed they had mastered the Force, and were destroyed entirely by that belief. I have been waiting, in that room, for something worth waking for. Anakin looks at the flat expanse of rock half buried in the dune beside them. It reads differently now, the wrong angle, the subsurface geometry. The way the sand around it has not shifted in patterns consistent with wind alone. You came out of the ground, he says. I did. How long were you down there? She considers. Since before your republic wore its current face. He should be frightened. The rational version of this, the version Anakin has rehearsed every time a stranger in Mos Espa offered him something, is that this woman is dangerous, and he should leave. The rational version keeps losing to the pressure in the air, which has not diminished, which feels less like a threat and more like a question. What were you waiting for? He asks. Kreia's scarred face turns toward him with an exactness that makes the blindness feel like a performance. A vergence, she says. A place where the Force folds back on itself so acutely that it produces a child with more raw potential than any being I have encountered in 4,000 years of study. She pauses. I did not expect it to be 9 years old and covered in engine grease. Anakin looks down at his hands. The grease is old, worked into the lines of his knuckles. The Jedi look for something like that. He says carefully. I heard 2 of them talking in the market once. About a prophecy. Yes, Kreia says, and her voice carries the exact tone Anakin uses when Watto explains the rules of a bet that is rigged in Watto's favor. They would. You don't believe in the prophecy. I believe the Force is real. I believe your capacity within it is real. I believe a prophecy is a story powerful beings tell themselves to avoid the responsibility of making choices. She folds her hands in her lap, unhurried. The Jedi will tell you that you are chosen, that the Force selected you, that your destiny is written in the structure of the galaxy itself. Tell me, boy, what happens to a person who believes their destiny is already written? Anakin is quiet. They stop writing, he says. The not-quite smile appears again. They stop writing, she agrees. And then they do whatever they are told, because the story is already determined, and the only question is whether they will play their assigned role with grace or with resistance. She turns her face away from him, toward the open desert. The Sith will offer you something different and worse. They will tell you that the only truth is power, and that power justifies everything it produces. This is also a cage, a more comfortable one, for a time. And what do you offer? Anakin asks. The silence stretches, not empty, but weighted. The suns move a precise increment across the sky. Somewhere distant, something moves under the sand. Nothing, Kreia says. I offer you nothing. No destiny. No permission. No absolution in advance for the choices you will make. She stands, and the movement is fluid in a way her age should make impossible, a subtle wrongness in how little effort it costs her. I offer you the question. Every day, for as long as you choose to remain. Not the answer, the question. What does this act cost the galaxy in 10 years? What does this kindness produce in the person who receives it? What are you, when no one is watching and no doctrine is telling you what to be? Anakin stares up at her. That sounds like a hard way to live, he says. Yes, Kreia says simply. It is. The easy ways have been tried. She begins to walk, away from the rock formation, away from the direction of Mos Espa, out into the dune sea with the certainty of someone who does not need eyes to know where the ground is. Come, or do not come. I will not compel you. Compulsion is the first lesson in how to produce a slave, and I have no interest in another one of those. Anakin watches her for 3 seconds. Then he gets up and follows. He does not know, walking into that desert, that this is the moment everything changes. He is 9 years old. He knows only that for the first time in his life, someone has spoken to him as though the answer to his life is not already written somewhere he cannot reach. That is enough. The planet has no living sky. What passes for atmosphere above Malachor 5 is a permanent geological bruise, sulfur yellow at the edges, darkening to a gray-green at the zenith that suggests depth without suggesting heaven. The ruins of ships, thousands of them, hang suspended in the upper gravity anomaly like insects trapped in amber, their hulls fractured along stress lines that no natural force could have produced. They have been there for 4,000 years. They will be there for 4,000 more. The ground is worse. Anakin learns this on the first day. The surface of Malachor V is not rock in any sense he understood on Tatooine. It is compressed debris, the fused, superheated remains of men and machines and weapons and faith. Pressed flat by a gravitational event so violent it rewrote the planet's geology in an afternoon. He walks on the dead. There is no other way to walk here. Kreia gives him one night to absorb this. Then, the work begins. She starts with stillness, which he hates. Sit, she says, on the second morning, in the hollow of what was once a Mandalorian command vessel before the mass shadow generator turned it into a 7-meter depression in the earth. Do not reach for the Force. Do not suppress it. Sit, for how long? Until you stop asking that question. He sits for 4 hours the first day. The Force moves through him the way it always has. Vast, involuntary. A river he has been swimming in since birth without knowing it was a river, or that other people drowned in it. On Tatooine it manifested as instinct. The pod racer. The machine components that fit themselves together under his hands with an ease his mother called gift and Watto called good luck, and Anakin had never called anything because naming it felt like putting a fence around it. Here, sitting in the ruins of a civilization's worst decision, he feels it differently. It wants something, he says, on the third day of the exercise. Kreia is behind him. She moves without sound on Malachor's fused surface, which should be impossible, which he has stopped questioning. Elaborate. The Force. It has a pull, a direction, like it knows where I should go and it's waiting for me to follow. And do you follow it? Usually, he admits. It's usually right. Yes. Kreia says. That is the problem. He turns. She is standing at the lip of the depression, her robes absolutely still in a wind that is moving everything else. How is being right a problem? A current that is always right is a current you stop questioning, she says. And a current you stop questioning is a current that eventually carries you somewhere you did not choose to go, for reasons that serve something other than you. She descends into the depression without using her hands for balance. The Jedi call this surrender to the will of the Force. They have made a virtue of their own abdication. Tell me, if a river carries a man to a city he would never have chosen to visit, is the river wise, or is the man simply wet? Anakin is quiet for a moment. What do the Sith say? The Sith say the river should obey the man. She settles across from him, cross-legged, her scarred face angled with that uncanny exactness, which is also wrong, and produces something considerably more violent than a wet man. She folds her hands. You will learn to stand in the river, not to follow it, not to dam it. To know where it is going, and choose, consciously, whether that destination serves any purpose worth the cost of the journey. Anakin looks at his hands. How do I do that? Badly, Kreia says, and then less badly. Begin again. The combat training starts in the 4th week, and it is nothing like what he expected. He expected forms. He has seen Jedi in the market on Coruscant once, through a holobroadcast, precise and elegant, every movement a word and a vocabulary built over centuries. He expected that. He expected Kreia to hand him something and say, here is the shape of what a warrior looks like. Instead, she hands him 2 metal rods, unweighted, the length of short swords, and tells him to attack her. He does. She moves, not quickly, which is what he expects, but early. She is not where his strike lands before he has finished deciding to make it. He hits nothing, twice, and on the 3rd attempt she puts him on the ground with a redirection so minimal he cannot locate the moment it happened. You telegraphed, she says from somewhere above him. I didn't move yet. You decided, she says. The decision is the telegraph. Your body broadcasts your intentions to anyone trained to read it 3 full movements before you execute. This is not a flaw of your body. It is a flaw of your emotional investment in the outcome. She waits for him to stand. You want to hit me. That want is visible. Remove it. I can't just not want to hit you. No, you cannot not want anything. Suppression is not what I am asking for. She repositions the rods in his hands with 2 precise adjustments, changing the grip angle on each. I am asking you to hold the outcome lightly. You may hit me, or you may not. Either result tells you something. Approach it as information rather than victory. He tries again. She moves early again. But this time he feels the edge of something, a faint awareness of her shift, a half-second earlier than his eyes register it. There, she says, though he missed. That? Hold that. The Trakata lesson comes 6 weeks in, on a night when the suspended ships above cast a grid of shadow over the camp. Light the blade, Kreia says. She has provided the hilt, a plain thing, no aesthetic investment, a functional cylinder with a neutral internal crystal that throws silver-white light. It hums differently from any saber he has heard in holo broadcasts. Lower, more patient. He ignites it. The white blade throws shadows in all directions. Now extinguish it. Mid-swing. He does. The motion feels wrong, like pulling a punch, like lying mid-sentence. Again, he does it again, and again. For an hour, until the wrongness begins to sand itself smooth. This technique has a name, Kreia says. Trakata, the established orders consider it dishonorable. Can you identify why? Anakin thinks. Because it's deceptive. Because it unmakes the contract. She corrects. Formal lightsaber combat operates on an implicit agreement, 2 practitioners, 2 active blades, a contest of skill within a shared vocabulary of forms. Trakata violates the vocabulary. The opponent prepares for a blade that is not there. She lets him sit with that. The Jedi find this dishonorable because they have confused the rules of a ritual with the requirements of survival. The Sith find it distasteful for different reasons. Aggression has its own grammar, and Trakata is not aggressive. It is patient. It waits. Neither order produces students who are comfortable with patience that has no emotional signature attached. What does it feel like to the person on the other side? Unreadable, she says, which is precisely what you need to be. He asks her, once, about the ships above them. It is late. What passes for late on Malachor 5th, where the sky darkens only to a deeper shade of wrong. They are eating. Or Anakin is eating. Kreia observes in the way she observes everything, with the attention of someone cataloging rather than experiencing. Were you here? He asks. When it happened? When the mass shadow generator activated. She does not pretend not to understand the question. No, I arrived after. To witness what ideology at full velocity produces. She looks upward at the suspended hulls, though looking is not what she is doing. Mandalorians who believed war was the highest virtue. Jedi who believed their cause sanctified any method of ending it. Both convictions operating at maximum intensity. The result is what you are sitting on. Anakin follows her gaze upward. My greatest student did this, she says, and there is no grief in it, something older than grief. Something that has been examined so many times it has lost its texture. Someone I trained. She chose the pragmatic horror over the prolonged one, and she was not wrong in her arithmetic, and the arithmetic produced this, and I have spent 4,000 years deciding what to do with that equation. What did you decide? Kreia is quiet for a long moment. That the question matters more than the answer. She says, that a student who learns to ask it, really ask it, without flinching at the cost of the answer, is worth 4,000 years of waiting. She stands, brushing ash from her robes. Sleep. Tomorrow we begin working on your ability to mask your presence in the Force. You are currently as subtle as a detonating star. Anakin looks at the ships above him for a long moment after she goes. He is 10 years old and sitting on top of the galaxy's oldest mistake. He thinks, this is what happens when people stop asking the question. He does not sleep for some time. The capital of the Republic never sleeps. It cannot. Sleep requires the capacity to stop. And Coruscant has been in continuous operation for so long that the concept of stopping has been architecturally eliminated. There is no ground level that sees natural light, no stratum of the city that does not have something moving through it at every hour. The planet is its own argument. That civilization, taken to its logical conclusion, produces something that functions perfectly and feels like nothing. Anakin is 16 and he has been here for 3 days and he has not been seen once. This is the test Kreia has designed. Not a combat test, not a philosophical exercise. Those are daily, ongoing, woven into every conversation and meal and hour of training on Malachor. This is something different. She has given him a target, a time frame, and one instruction. Do not exist. The target is a mid-level Trade Federation logistics coordinator named Darrow Veth, a Neimoidian with a secondary accounting operation running through a shell company on Coruscant's 40th level, funneling Republic contract overcharges into a private account on Munilinst. Kreia has given Anakin his schedule, his routes, the names of his 3 regular contacts. The instruction is not to intercept Veth, not to confront him, expose him, or report him. The instruction is to shadow him for 72 hours without registering in the Force, in any surveillance system, or in the peripheral awareness of any of the 12 Jedi currently operating in this sector of Coruscant, one of whom passes within 4 meters of Anakin on the first afternoon. He does not breathe differently when the Jedi passes. He has practiced not breathing differently. The Jedi, a Padawan, maybe 17, with a blue blade clipped to her belt and the particular quality of alert relaxation that marks someone in the early stages of believing their training is complete, walks past a food stall where Anakin is examining a display of synthetic fruit with the focused attention of a person who intends to buy something. She slows. Not much. A fraction. Her head tilts a degree toward him. Anakin picks up a piece of fruit, examines it, sets it down, picks up another. She keeps walking. He waits 30 seconds, counts the rhythm of foot traffic, and moves. The Force concealment technique took 8 months to produce anything Kreia considered functional. The early attempts were, by her assessment, catastrophic. Not because Anakin suppressed his signature badly, but because he suppressed it in entirely the wrong direction. His instinct was to go quiet, to pull inward, to make himself small in the Force the way he had made himself small in Watto's workshop when Watto was in a particular mood. "You are hiding," Kreia said after the 3rd week of failure. "That's what you asked me to do. I asked you to become invisible. These are not the same thing. A hidden thing has a shape, the shape of its absence. A hole in a wall is as visible as a brick, if you know walls." She moved around him in the low light of the Malachor training chamber. "What does background noise sound like?" "Everything at once." "Yes, not silence. Everything at once, undifferentiated, without pattern or intent." She stopped in front of him. "You are not trying to be silent. You are trying to be everything. You are trying to be the ambient Force noise of a planet, the geological pressure, the accumulated presence of billions of living things, the low static of a universe in constant motion. You are not hiding. You are becoming the wall." It took him another 4 months to understand the distinction in his body rather than just his mind. The difference was subtle and total, the difference between holding his breath and breathing so shallowly that the movement of his chest became indistinguishable from the room's air currents. Not absence. Presence without pattern. Signal without signal. By month 8, Kreia had stopped being able to locate him in the Force at distance. She told him this once, briefly, without ceremony. "You are functional," she said. "Do not let it make you comfortable." On the 2nd day of the Coruscant test, Anakin sits in a public transit car 3 seats behind Darrow Veth, and listens to a conversation Veth is having in Neimoidian, with a contact he meets at the 42nd level interchange. His Neimoidian is not perfect. Kreia's language instruction is thorough but has the character of someone who learned 12 languages to extract information rather than to make conversation, but it is good enough to catch the shape of what's being arranged. The numbers are large. The destination is not Munilinst. The destination is a banking account on Scipio, which connects. Through 2 intermediate account identifiers, Anakin commits to memory, to a corporate entity he has seen in Kreia's research before. An entity that operates in the space between the Republic's legal infrastructure and something older, more patient, more deliberately difficult to trace. He files this away. He does not act on it. This is the other lesson. The one that took longer than the Force concealment, longer than the Trakata, longer than learning to stand in the river without following it. The lesson that information is not the same as obligation, that knowing something does not require him to immediately do something about it, that the gap between knowledge and action is exactly the space where clarity lives, and that collapsing that gap reflexively is how people with good intentions produce catastrophic consequences. Kreia delivered this lesson through a question, as she delivered all lessons. If you find a man planning to hurt someone tomorrow, she asked, and you stop him today, what have you learned about why he was planning to hurt someone? Nothing, Anakin said. And the next man with the same reason will do the same thing, and you will stop him, and learn nothing, and stop the next man, and learn nothing, until you have become an instrument of the symptom rather than the cause, spending your strength indefinitely on a problem you have never once addressed. She let that settle. This is the Jedi's primary error. They keep the peace. They do not understand the peace. And so the peace keeps breaking, and they keep arriving to restore it, and believe this constitutes wisdom. The third day. Anakin is on a rooftop on the 44th level, which is not a rooftop in any traditional sense. It is the upper platform of a commercial district, open to the vertical airspace between towers, with speeders moving at 4 distinct altitude lanes above him. The city hums in every direction, a constant mechanical respiration that he has, after 3 days, stopped hearing consciously. He watches Veth complete the transfer. He watches the contact receive confirmation. He memorizes both of their faces, both of their routes home, and the specific terminal Veth uses, which will have a log, which will be findable later by someone with the right access and a reason to look. Then, he leaves. 44th level to 47th by service elevator, 47th to street adjacent, transit by foot, transit to the public landing tier where Kreia is waiting in a nondescript craft that has, characteristically, no identifying markings and a transponder code that belongs to a ship that has been listed as decommissioned for 6 years. He boards without speaking. She does not ask how it went. She extends one hand, palm up. He places in it a small data chip, his handwritten account of the 3 days, every name and number and route and connection point, compiled from memory because he did not use any recording device. Recording devices leave their own signatures. She holds the chip for a moment without moving. The Padawan on the first afternoon, she says. She slowed, he says. 4 meters. Head tilt. About a degree. She felt something. Something. Not me. I think she felt the gap, the place where something should be. He considers. Like how you can tell a sentence is missing a word even before you figure out which one. Kreia is quiet for long enough that the ship's ambient systems become audible. That will become a problem, she says, if your signature becomes known in its absence rather than its presence. We will need to refine the technique. A pause. The account chain. Scipio, he says, not munilinst. 2 intermediaries. The terminal entity I've seen before in your research, the one with the outer rim construction contracts that don't correspond to any construction. Another silence, different in quality from the first. Yes, Kreia says. That entity will become relevant. Not yet. She sets the chip down. You are not ready for that conversation yet. When will I be? She looks at him, or performs the gesture so precisely it is functionally identical. When you stop asking when, she says. The ship lifts from the platform and folds into Coruscant's endless traffic without a ripple. One more anonymous vessel in a city that has forgotten it ever had a ground. Below them, the capital of the Republic continues its permanent, sleepless operation. Somewhere in it, a patient man in a high office feels nothing, senses nothing. Finds this, for the first time in a long time, mildly interesting. He files it away. He does not act on it yet. He has learned, over 60 years, that the most dangerous things are the ones that don't announce themselves. The office of Supreme Chancellor Palpatine occupies a position in the Republic Executive Building that is not accidental. Every architectural decision in the space, the height of the ceilings, the placement of the windows, the angle at which afternoon light falls across the desk, was specified by the man who sits behind it. The room is designed to make visitors feel that they have arrived somewhere important, which is different from making them feel welcome, and the distinction is the entire point. Anakin is 17. He has been in this building twice before, both times as an anonymous presence in a public gallery, observing Senate sessions that Kreia identified as worth studying. This is the first time he has been invited. The invitation arrived through a third party, a mid-level senatorial aide who approached him in a cultural district on the 39th level, delivered a card with a time and an address, and did not wait for a response. The card was personalized. It used his name. His real name, not any of the 3 working identities he has maintained on Coruscant over the past year. He told Kreia immediately. She was quiet for longer than usual. "He found you," she said finally, not with alarm. With the quality of a physician observing a symptom that confirms a prior diagnosis. "How?" the Padawan, she said. "On the first afternoon." Her report reached the Council as an anomaly, an unusual absence in the Force, notable but unclassifiable. The Council filed it. Palpatine has informants in the Temple's outer administrative staff who collect everything the Council considers unremarkable enough to leave unsecured. She turned the card over in her fingers without reading it, running her thumb across the embossed surface. "He did not find you through the Force. He found you through information architecture, which means he has been watching the Council's blind spots and collecting everything that falls into them. Should I go? What do you think?" Anakin thought about the Scipio account chain, the construction contracts that corresponded to nothing, the patient, 60-year silence of something building toward a shape he could feel the edges of without being able to name the center. He thought about Kreia's lesson on information versus obligation, and the space between knowing and acting. "I think," he said carefully, "that if he's found me, not going teaches him more than going does. If I don't appear, he knows I received the invitation and chose to refuse it, which tells him I'm aware of something. If I go, all he knows is that I'm willing to be in a room with him." Kreia set the card down. "And what will you learn," she said, "from being in a room with him?" He picked up the card. "Everything he wants me to think," he said. Palpatine stands at the window when Anakin enters, which is a choice. The afternoon light falls across him from behind, which is a choice. He turns with exactly the right measure of pleased surprise, the expression of a man who has been waiting but does not wish to seem like he has been waiting. "Anakin," he says. The name in his mouth carries warmth and recognition and a specific texture of personal investment. "I hope you'll forgive the unconventional introduction. I find formal channels produce formal conversations, and I had hoped for something more genuine. I'm not sure how you know my name," Anakin says. He keeps his voice even and his presence in the Force flat, not suppressed. Ambient. Background static in a room already full of it. "I make it my business to know about remarkable young people." Palpatine moves from the window to the sitting area. 2 chairs, a low table, tea that has been prepared in advance. He gestures to a chair with the ease of a host who has done this 10,000 times. "Please." Anakin sits. He does not touch the tea. "I've followed your movements with considerable interest," Palpatine continues, settling across from him with the unhurried quality of someone who has never once needed to rush anything. "A boy from Tatooine, no institutional affiliation, remarkable command of the Force and apparently no interest in the organizations that would normally compete aggressively for someone with your abilities. The Jedi have somehow missed you entirely." A pause, expertly weighted. That speaks to either extraordinary luck or extraordinary skill, and I suspect it is not luck. "What do you want?" Anakin asks. Palpatine smiles. It reaches his eyes, which is the most dangerous kind. Directness. "I appreciate that." He lifts his own tea. Unhurried. "I want to understand you. A young man of your capacity, operating independently, outside any order or allegiance, that is either very dangerous or very interesting, and I find it is rarely one without the other." Anakin looks at him. The Force reads him as warm, genuinely invested, concerned in the way of a man who has spent decades cultivating the political relationships that require him to actually care about the people in front of him, or to replicate caring with sufficient fidelity that the distinction ceases to matter. It is an extraordinary performance. Anakin can feel the craft of it. The way each sentence is positioned to produce a specific emotional response. The way the warmth in his voice is calibrated to the exact frequency that a boy without a father would find most difficult to dismiss. Kreia spent 6 months teaching him to read this. Not as a lesson about Palpatine specifically, she had not named him then. Had not needed to. She taught it as a lesson about architecture. A sentence, she said, is a building. Every word is a weight-bearing element. A skilled manipulator builds sentences the way a skilled engineer builds structures, not to inform, but to produce specific effects in the person standing inside them. Learn to read the engineering before you respond to the building. He reads the engineering now. You are special. Load-bearing wall, positioned first, before any other claim. Everything else will be built on top of it. The institutions that should have found you have failed you. Secondary wall. The foundation for whatever alternative will be offered. I see you when they could not. The roof. The implied shelter. Come in from the cold. You're going to tell me, Anakin says, that the Jedi Order is rigid, dogmatic, that they've failed to recognize what I am, and that represents a broader failure of institutional vision. He keeps his voice conversational, not confrontational. And then you're going to suggest that there are other paths, other frameworks that value strength without the Jedi's particular flavor of self-denial. And you'll frame this as pragmatism rather than ideology, because pragmatism sounds like realism, and realism sounds like honesty, and honesty feels like respect. A beat. The warmth in Palpatine's expression does not disappear. It shifts, fractionally, barely perceptible, the adjustment a skilled performer makes when a scene begins to move in an unexpected direction. He is not alarmed. He is interested. You have, he says carefully, been well taught. I've heard this argument before, Anakin says. A better version of it. From someone with nothing to gain from making it. And who was that? Anakin looks at him for a moment. The Force, flat and ambient, gives nothing away. Someone who also told me, he says, that the Sith's version of the same argument is what the honest argument looks like after 60 years of self-interest have worked on it. The shape is the same. The load-bearing walls are the same. The only thing that's changed is who benefits from my walking through the door. Palpatine is quiet. This is the first genuine silence Anakin has felt from him, not the performed silence of a man preparing his next sentence, but a real one. The pause of someone recalibrating. You are not what I expected, Palpatine says. No, Anakin agrees. I imagine I'm not. What do you want then? Palpatine asks, if you've seen through my architecture, as you put it, what does a young man with your abilities actually want from the galaxy? Anakin picks up the tea, drinks it, sets it down. I want to understand what you're building, he says. Not what you're building it for, I think I already know that. But the structure itself, the materials, the timeline. He meets the old man's eyes without force or challenge, simply with attention. You've been patient for a very long time. I'd like to understand what patience at that scale actually looks like from the inside. The silence that follows is a different kind again. Palpatine looks at him with something that is not warmth and not coldness, but the specific focused quality of a man who has just identified a variable he did not account for. Perhaps, he says slowly, you would like to meet again. Perhaps, Anakin says, and stands, and leaves without looking back. He finds Kreia in the corridor outside the building. She is standing in a maintenance alcove with the patience of the geological. Well, she says. He's going to be a problem, Anakin says. Yes, not because he's dangerous. Because he's genuinely good at it. He falls into step beside her. He almost made me feel seen. For about 3 seconds. 3 seconds, Kreia says, is a long time in a room with Darth Sidious. Anakin stops walking. She does not. Keep up, she says. We have work to do. The foundry levels beneath the Geonosian execution arena exist in a permanent state of industrial fever. Heat rises from the smelting operations below in waves that make the stone walls sweat, and the constant percussion of fabrication machinery travels through the rock as a low, bone-deep vibration that has no rhythm and no pause. The Geonosians built their execution theater directly above their primary weapons factory, because the distinction between the two functions did not, to their architecture, require separation. Anakin has been here for 6 hours. He came because Kreia told him to come. That is the full extent of the briefing she provided. A set of coordinates, a time, and one sentence: there is someone on Geonosis who needs to understand what you are. He has learned, over 8 years, that her briefings are precisely as long as they need to be. The cell block on the foundry level is not a cell block in any official capacity. The Geonosians do not advertise the holding function of this space. It reads on any external schematic as a secondary material storage corridor, which it also is, the two purposes coexisting with the pragmatic efficiency of a culture that sees no reason to build 2 rooms when one will serve. The crates of unprocessed ore are stacked along the walls with the same indifference as the restraint columns bolted to the floor between them. There are 3 prisoners in the corridor when Anakin arrives. He recognizes 2 of them. Obi-Wan Kenobi, whom he knows from study. Kreia has maintained a detailed working knowledge of every significant Force-sensitive in the current era. And Kenobi's file is substantial. Padawan to Qui-Gon Jinn, knight at 25 following the Naboo incident, elevated to Master in the decade since. The mission to Kamino, the cloning facility, the trail that ends here. He looks like his file, except more tired. The senator from Naboo he knows differently. He has seen Padmé Amidala 3 times in public Senate sessions, and twice from a distance in corridor situations, and he has noted, with the same precision he applies to everything, that she moves through political space the way Kreia moves through physical space, with an economy that broadcasts nothing and achieves everything. She is suspended from a restraint column with the specific expression of someone who is calculating rather than frightened. The 3rd prisoner is a Naboo pilot he does not know. He begins with Kenobi's restraints. Kenobi watches him with the particular focused calm of a trained Jedi encountering an unknown variable. "I don't know you," Kenobi says. "No." Anakin agrees. He examines the restraint mechanism, Geonosian design, which he has studied because Kreia maintains that understanding your environment includes understanding who built it and how they think. The release is at the secondary collar, not the primary cuff, which is a Geonosian habit. The obvious mechanism is always false. "You're Force-sensitive," Kenobi says. "It is not a question." "Am I?" Anakin says. He finds the secondary collar release and applies precise pressure at the correct angle. The restraint disengages. Kenobi steps down, rubbing his wrists, and watches Anakin move to the senator's column. "I would have felt you coming." "I didn't." "I know. That's not a small thing. I know that too." He looks at Padmé Amidala for the first time at close range. She meets his eyes with a directness that is not hostility and not gratitude. It is assessment, clean and mutual, which he finds immediately more interesting than either alternative would have been. He finds the secondary collar on her restraint. "This will pinch." "Do it," she says. It does. She does not react. They are moving through the foundry's secondary access corridor, Anakin in front. Kenobi managing the pilot who has a leg injury, Padmé matching Anakin's pace at his left shoulder, when the door at the corridor's end opens. Count Dooku fills the frame the way significant things fill frames, not through physical size, though he is tall, but through the quality of space reorganizing itself around his presence. He is old in the way of things that have not diminished, white-haired, precisely postured, with the aesthetic of a man who has spent his entire life treating his own existence as a kind of argument for excellence. He looks at Anakin and stops. "Now this," Dooku says, "is unexpected." Anakin stops walking. Behind him, Kenobi goes very still. "The boy from the Chancellor's file," Dooku says, though boy seems increasingly inadequate as a description. His head tilts a degree, the gesture of a man used to reading people and finding the habit effortless. "You're not Jedi. The signature is wrong. Not Sith either. The baseline is too neutral." something else entirely. He steps into the corridor with the unhurried quality of a man who believes all exits are theoretical until he decides otherwise. I find I'm quite curious about you. I'm not here to satisfy your curiosity, Anakin says. No, Dooku agrees pleasantly. You're here to extract 3 prisoners, which was functionally impossible 40 minutes ago, and is now merely very difficult. Given that the arena above us is about to become considerably more active. He glances past Anakin to Kenobi. Obi-Wan. I had hoped our conversation earlier was merely delayed. It was, Kenobi says. Interrupted, Dooku returns his attention to Anakin with the quality of a man setting aside a secondary concern. Walk with me, he says. I'll let them go. You'll let them go, Anakin says. Because there are 4 of us and one of you in this corridor has 2 exits. There are 4 of you and 1 of me, Dooku agrees, and I have sealed both exits from here, and the Geonosian Guard rotation returns to this corridor in 11 minutes, and I am offering you a conversation that I believe you will find valuable in exchange for 11 minutes of your time. A pause. The Senator and the Jedi may stand at the secondary exit. I will open it for them in 11 minutes regardless of how our conversation goes. This is not a negotiation. I'm simply asking for something I believe you're curious enough to give. Anakin looks at him. The Force reads Dooku as layered, a surface of aristocratic sincerity over something older and more deliberately constructed beneath it, like a building whose original architecture has been renovated so many times that the current occupant has forgotten the foundation doesn't belong to them. He turns to Padmé. She gives him nothing, which means she has run the arithmetic and reached the same place he has and is waiting to see which direction he moves. 11 minutes, Anakin says. They stand at the corridor's midpoint. Dooku is relaxed in the way of people who have trained themselves out of posture that could be read as tension. You've met Palpatine, Dooku says. Once and? He's good, Anakin says. Better than the reports suggest. The warmth is functional. It's not performed. It's cultivated, which is harder to see through and harder to dismiss. Something in Dooku's expression adjusts. Marginally, he cultivated it on me for years before I understood what I was looking at. I was one of the finest minds in the Order, and it still took me the better part of a decade. A pause. You sat with him once and walked out. I had better preparation. Who prepared you? Anakin says nothing. Dooku accepts this without pressure, which is itself a technique. I want to tell you what I am, he says, because I think you already know, and because the space between what we both know and what we're both pretending is wasted time, and I find waste distasteful. He folds his hands behind his back. I serve Darth Sidious. I have for years, in the belief that the corruption of the Republic is genuine and that the separatist movement represents a viable structural alternative. I have had, in recent months, growing cause to question the second half of that equation. But not enough to stop. Anakin says. Not yet, Dooku says, because stopping, from where I stand, is not a safe thing to do impulsively. He looks at Anakin with the directness of someone who has decided honesty is tactically optimal. Sidious is looking for a replacement. He has been for some time. You are currently the most interesting candidate he has encountered, which means you are also in a specific kind of danger that you may not be fully accounting for. I'm accounting for it. Are you accounting for the fact that his patience is not infinite? Dooku says. That there is a timeline attached to the Clone Wars he has engineered. And that timeline has a point of no return after which the identity of his apprentice matters less than simply having one? Anakin looks at him. Why are you telling me this? Dooku's expression does something that is not quite regret, but occupies the same structural space. Because I was, once, standing where you are standing. Someone should have told me. He steps back. The exit will open in 3 minutes. Whatever you're planning, accelerate it. The window is narrower than it appears. The door at the corridor's far end opens. Kenobi moves first, pilot supported on his shoulder. Padmé moves second and pauses 1 step past Anakin. Thank you, she says, simply without theater. Don't thank me yet, Anakin says. She holds his gaze for 1 moment with that clean assessing directness, and then she goes. Anakin looks at Dooku one last time. The timeline, he says. How narrow? 2 years, Dooku says. Perhaps less. Anakin nods once. Then he follows the others into the open air, carrying the number 2 years like a stone placed carefully in his chest, feeling its weight settle. Already calculating what it costs and what it changes, and what must now happen faster than he had planned. Behind him, Count Dooku stands alone in the corridor. He does not look like a man who has made a mistake. He looks like a man who has, after a very long time, done something clean. The deepest chamber of the Traya Academy exists at the planet's gravitational center, a space that the Sith who built it understood, correctly, as a place where the Force behaves differently, not stronger, not weaker. Differently, the ambient energy here has the quality of pressure at depth. It does not push in any single direction but inward from all of them simultaneously. A constant reminder that the space you occupy is borrowed, and the planet has opinions about the loan. Anakin has trained in this chamber for 3 years. He knows every pressure point in the floor. He knows the way the Force eddies around the 2 load-bearing pillars at the chamber's east axis, creating a half-second interference pattern that can be used to mask a movement if you know to step into it at the right moment. He knows that the chamber's acoustics make whispers carry and shouts die, which Kreia noted once was architecturally intentional. The Sith who built the Traya Academy believed that the only conversations worth having were quiet ones. He is standing at the chamber's center when Kreia says, "Today you will fight me." He has been waiting for this for 8 years. The way she says it is not ceremonial. It carries the same flat informational quality as everything she says. She might be telling him the temperature outside, or the structural weakness in the 3rd column, or the name of a senator worth watching. The absence of ceremony is itself the point. Rules? He asks. None, she says. This is not a test with a correct answer. It is an assessment with a complete one. He reaches for his hilt. The silver-white blade ignites in the low light of the chamber, throwing shadows that the 2 pillars immediately complicate. He holds the weapon with the loose precision Kreia drilled into him years ago, grip firm enough for control, relaxed enough for adjustment, the blade's angle communicating nothing about intent. Kreia stands 12 meters away. Her hands are at her sides. She has no weapon. He has asked her about this before, why she never drew a lightsaber in his presence, never demonstrated the technique she was teaching through anything other than verbal instruction and the occasional devastating physical correction. Her answer, delivered once, and not repeated, was, a teacher who relies on their own demonstration produces students who learn the teacher's limits. I have no interest in your knowing my limits. He has spent 8 years constructing a model of her capabilities from inference, reaction, and the precise quality of the corrections she applies when he makes errors. The model is incomplete, and he knows it. He moves. He opens with a Trikata feint, blade active, 2 steps of committed approach, deactivation at the point of expected contact. The move has worked against 11 opponents over the past 2 years, including 2 Force-sensitive security contractors Kreia arranged as sparring partners without telling him they were coming. Against them, the deactivation produced a half-second of recalibration that he used to control the engagement's terms. Kreia does not recalibrate. She steps through the space where the blade was with the flat certainty of someone who registered the feint before he committed to it. And he feels the Force shift around him in a way that is not a push and not a pull, but something more intimate. A gentle, absolute redirection of his own momentum, like a hand placed on a spinning top that does not stop it but simply changes which way it's falling. He lands. Rolls. Up. She is standing where she was before. She has not moved more than 2 steps total. You opened with deception, she says. Why? Because it works, he says, moving again. It has worked, she corrects, and the distinction arrives at the same moment her Force presence expands in a way he has not felt from her before, not aggressive, but total, filling the chamber the way water fills a container, present at every surface simultaneously. Against opponents with fixed expectations. I have no fixed expectations. Try the thing you have been saving. He stops moving. The thing he has been saving is not a technique Kreia taught him. It is a technique he developed himself, Over 2 years of private practice in this chamber at hours he believed she was not observing, which he now suspects was an error in that belief. It uses the telekinetic micro-adjustment principle she established, extended into a new application, not redirecting a single point of contact, but weaving 4 simultaneous adjustments into a single movement, targeting his opponent's footing, blade angle, breathing rhythm, and center of gravity in the same instant. He has never used it in a real fight because it requires a quality of presence he has only achieved reliably in the last 6 months. He uses it now. The result is the closest he has come to landing contact with her. He feels the 4 threads of adjustment connect, feels 2 of them register. Her footing shifts, her center of gravity moves, and in the space that opens from those 2 adjustments he drives a committed strike that should, by the geometry of the moment, be unavoidable. She catches his wrist, not with the force, with her hand. The grip is precise and total, and she uses his own committed momentum to redirect him past her and into a controlled stop against the chamber wall. No impact, she bleeds the velocity out of it over 3 meters so that he arrives at the wall with exactly enough force to register, and no more. He stands there for a moment, forearm against stone. 4 threads, she says, 2 connected. The error was in the sequencing. Footing and center of gravity together create a cascade your opponent can feel before it completes. Separate them by a half count. Footing first, then the rest. He turns around. You felt all 4. I felt the intent beneath all 4, she says. The technique was excellent. You are not yet fully invisible in your intent. When you are, the technique will be very difficult to counter. She moves to the chamber's center, and he notices, for the first time, or perhaps for the first time he lets himself notice, that she moves with less ease than she did 3 years ago. Not dramatically. A fractional quality of effort where there was none before. Come here. He crosses to her. She sits, which she has never done in this chamber, and gestures for him to sit across from her. He does. I am going to tell you something, she says, that I have not told you before. Not because I was protecting you from it. You are not someone who benefits from protection, but because the telling required this moment and not an earlier one. He waits. I am dying, she says. The words carry the same weight as all her words. No more, no less. The stasis that preserved me across 4,000 years extracted a cost that continued accruing after I woke. I have perhaps a year. She looks at him, with her scarred, exact face. This does not change your task. It changes only the timeline on which I am able to assist with it. Anakin is quiet for a long moment. How long have you known? Since shortly after we arrived here, she says. Since the first month. He processes this. 8 years of training, a known terminal clock running underneath all of it. Never mentioned. He looks for anger in himself and finds something cleaner, a recognition of the consistency of it. She told him what he needed when he needed it. She is telling him this now because now is when he needs it. The Scipio account chain, he says. The construction contracts. Yes, that's what the next phase is. The next phase, she says, is dismantling the infrastructure Sidious has spent 60 years building. Not confronting him. Not yet. First you remove the architecture that makes him possible. The financial channels. The compromised senators. The supply chains that would allow a private army to persist independent of Republic sanction. She looks at him steadily. You have the training. You have the knowledge. You have the skills to move through the Republic's systems like a current, through water, present, effective, undetected. What you now need is a reason that belongs to you, and not to me. What does that mean? It means, Kreia says, that I found you, and I trained you, and I gave you the tools, but the choice to use them has always required an anchor that I cannot provide. Because I am not part of your life in the galaxy, I am outside it. You need something inside it. She pauses. You have, over the past year, encountered a senator from Naboo on 3 separate occasions. He says nothing. She is sharp, Kreia says. without commentary. And she is, as of 6 months ago, aware that something she cannot classify as operating in the Republic's shadows and making things incrementally better. She is trying to find it. A pause. I am not telling you what to do with that information. No, Anakin says. You're just telling me the information. Yes, Kreia says. That is all I have ever done. He looks at her. Really looks. With the full presence she taught him to bring to observation. And for the first time in 8 years he allows himself to see not the teacher, but the person. Old and diminishing and sitting in the ruins of an ancient catastrophe she did not cause, but has spent 4 millennia carrying. Was I worth it? He asks. The weight. Kreia considers this with the seriousness she brings to every real question. Ask me in 2 years, she says. When the answer is complete. The financial district on Coruscant's upper levels presents itself as transparency, glass towers, open trading floors, the performed visibility of a system that wants to appear too well lit for shadows. The shadows are on the underside of everything, where the architecture assumes no one is looking because the architecture was designed by people who controlled who looked and where. Anakin has spent 4 months learning the underside. He works at night, mostly, not because darkness provides cover. On Coruscant, the distinction between day and night exists only above the 200th level, where the city's vertical density thins enough for natural light to register, but because the administrative systems that process the Republic's financial infrastructure run their reconciliation cycles between the 2nd and 4th hour, and during reconciliation the logging functions that track access queries run approximately 11 seconds behind real time. 11 seconds is enough. He is not stealing. He is reading. The Scipio account chain from Veth's transfer 4 years ago unraveled, over 8 months of patient work, into something considerably larger than a logistics coordinator's private skimming operation. The intermediate accounts connected to 17 separate corporate entities, which connected to 43 subsidiary holdings, which resolved, at the center, into a financial architecture that had no legitimate purpose and had been running continuously for 61 years. 61 years. Anakin checked the establishment date 3 times. The architecture predated the current war. It predated the Naboo crisis. It predated every political development that might have motivated its creation. It was built first, and the events that seemed to necessitate it came later, which meant the events were not the cause but the product, manufactured occasions for a structure that had been waiting to be used. He mapped the entire thing by hand. Paper, not digital. Kreia's instruction from 8 years ago, the record that cannot be accessed remotely cannot be accessed. Keep the critical knowledge in materials that require physical proximity to steal. The paper map covers 3 walls of the safe room he maintains on Coruscant's 61st level, a space registered to a defunct shipping company, paid for through 4 intermediate accounts, containing nothing that would indicate its purpose to anyone who entered without knowing what they were looking at. To anyone who did know what they were looking at, it was the most detailed existing account of Palpatine's financial nervous system. The first target was a senator named Lot Dodd. Dodd represented the Trade Federation in the Senate with the practiced sincerity of a man who understood that sincerity was a costume. His vote record was publicly unimpeachable. His private financial relationships, accessible through the Scipio chain's subsidiary holdings, revealed 23 years of payments from a shell entity that existed solely to move money between separatist procurement operations and Republic legislative outcomes. Anakin did not expose him. He moved him. The distinction is Kreia's. Delivered as a question in the 5th year of training, what is the difference between removing a piece and destroying it? The answer, developed over the following months, a destroyed piece becomes a martyr, a cautionary tale, a reason for the system to harden against future exposure. A moved piece becomes leverage, a gap in the opponent's formation, a resource that can be repositioned or simply rendered inert, without producing the defensive reaction that exposure creates. He moved Dodd by ensuring that 3 of the senator's most critical legislative allies received, through untraceable channels, accurate information about the nature of Dodd's financial relationships with their mutual opponents. No accusation. No demand. Just information, placed where it would produce the appropriate political isolation without requiring anyone to act overtly. Within 6 weeks, Dodd's committee assignments evaporated through the normal operation of Senate politics. His vote ceased to be reliable for Palpatine's purposes. Dodd remained in his seat, publicly intact, privately aware that something had happened that he could not locate or confront. That quality, the opponent's awareness that something is working against them, combined with the inability to find it, is the most valuable outcome. It produces caution, which produces delay, which produces the time Anakin needs. The second target was structural rather than personal. The clone army on Kamino had been paid for through a financial instrument that technically originated with a Jedi Master named Sifo Dyas. Anakin had confirmed this through 3 independent source chains, but the actual funding mechanism ran through the Scipio architecture. The practical implication was that the Army's continued operational funding, the maintenance contracts, the supply chains for equipment and training all ran through channels that Palpatine controlled and the Republic Senate believed were standard military procurement. Anakin spent 6 weeks identifying the 3 points in the funding chain where intervention would be least visible and most durable. Not cutting the funding. That would be noticed immediately and attributed to enemy action. Producing exactly the emergency response that would accelerate Palpatine's timeline rather than delay it. Instead, he introduced inefficiencies, administrative delays, compliance flags that required human review cycles, documentation requirements that generated processing backlogs in the military procurement office. None of it was illegal. All of it was devastating in aggregate. The clone army's operational readiness, per the assessment reports he was able to access through the same 11-second reconciliation window, declined 14% over 3 months. Palpatine's people corrected some of it. More inefficiencies appeared. The corrections chased the degradation without ever quite catching it, which was the point. He is sitting in the safe room at the 3rd hour, updating the paper map when he feels something. Not the Force. Or not only the Force. Something more specific. In the building's stairwell, 2 floors below. A presence that is not trying to hide, which is itself unusual in a building where all the tenants maintain the careful anonymity of people who have something to protect. He closes the map, folds it along its established creases, places it in the floor compartment under the 3rd desk leg, moves to the door. He opens it to find Padmé Amidala standing on the landing, alone, with the specific expression of someone who has arrived at the correct address and is deciding how to feel about that. "You've been making things happen," she says without preamble. "In the Senate. In the procurement system. Someone has been moving pieces for about 8 months and I have been trying to find them, because the pattern is either the most sophisticated hostile operation I've ever seen, or the most sophisticated friendly one, and I needed to know which. How did you find this address?" The shipping company this space is registered to dissolved 14 years ago, but has been paying its building fees continuously since, she says. That kind of administrative ghost is usually either incompetence or intent. You don't strike me as incompetent. He steps back from the door. She enters, looks at the room, the empty walls, the clean desk, the absence of anything that would indicate purpose, and then looks at him with that clean, assessing directness he has not been able to fully classify in 4 years of occasional proximity. "There's more than this room," she says. "Yes. How much more?" He considers her for a long moment. The Force reads her as it always has. Sharp and layered and free of the specific kind of motivated self-deception that makes most people readable if you know what to look for. She is not here for power. She is here because the Republic she has served since she was 14 is being eaten from the inside, and she has been trying to find the mouth of it, and she is, as Kreia noted, 8 months ago, getting closer. He makes the decision the way Kreia taught him to make decisions, not impulsively, not after excessive deliberation, but at the point where the available information supports a clear conclusion, and waiting for more information costs more than acting on what you have. There is a financial architecture, he says, that has been running for 61 years. It connects your trade federation, your banking clans, your separatist movement, and your chancellor's office into a single operational structure with a single operational purpose. He watches her face. "I have mapped all of it. I have been dismantling the edges for the past 8 months. The center is still intact. Padmé is quiet for a long moment. Show me, she says. He retrieves the map from the floor compartment, unfolds it, spreads it across the desk. She leans over it, and he watches her read it with the focused velocity of someone who has spent her adult life processing political complexity, and he watches the moment she reaches the center of the map and understands what she is looking at. She straightens slowly. Palpatine, she says. His name in her mouth has no warmth in it, just the flat recognition of someone who has looked at the engineering and understood the building. Yes, Anakin says. She looks at the map for another long moment. Then, she looks at him. How long have you known? About him specifically? 4 years. About the architecture? He pauses. 8 months longer than that. And you've been working alone. Until now, he says. She looks at him with something that is not gratitude and not alarm, but the specific quality of a person recalibrating around a new piece of information that changes the shape of everything adjacent to it. Who are you? She asks. It is the first time anyone has asked him that question, and meant all of it. Not his name, not his origin, not his allegiance, but the full question underneath those questions. He finds he does not have a short answer. In the 3rd hour on Coruscant's 61st level, with the map of 61 years of patient evil spread between them, he begins to explain. Above them, in a high office designed to make visitors feel they have arrived somewhere important, a patient man sits very still. Something has shifted in the architecture of his plans, a quality of wrongness he cannot locate, subtle and persistent, like a sound at the edge of hearing that stops exactly when you turn to find it. He files it away. He does not sleep. The 5 spires of the Jedi Temple rise above Coruscant's perpetual skyline with the specific quality of things that have been in one place long enough to stop being noticed. Senators pass them daily without looking up. Pilots root around them by reflex. The temple has become over 5,000 years of occupying the same coordinates, a feature of the landscape rather than a statement in it. Which is, Anakin thinks, walking the bridge approach at dawn, perhaps the most accurate architectural biography of the order it houses. He has not been inside before. He has observed it from 7 external positions, catalogued its patrol patterns across 14 days of intermittent surveillance, identified the 4 points where its force-sensing perimeter is thinnest due to the interference created by the cityscape's ambient life signatures. He knows the building the way he knows most things, from the outside, through patient attention, without announcing himself. Today, he announces himself. He walks through the main entrance in the early light, past 2 temple guards who feel him coming 40 meters out, and are already repositioning before he reaches the threshold. They do not stop him. He can feel the reason, the quality of his presence in the Force, ambient and unclassifiable, registers as neither threat nor ally but as something outside their existing vocabulary for either, and the training response to an unknown variable is containment and escalation, not interception. They send a runner ahead. He follows at a pace that gives the runner exactly enough lead time to be useful. The council chamber is at the temple's peak, which is a choice that says something about what the order values about its own perspective. 12 seats form a circle beneath a domed ceiling that opens the chamber to natural light, a room designed for deliberation, for the appearance of equality among those seated within it, for the impression that decisions made here emerge from consensus rather than hierarchy. The impression is incomplete. Some seats carry more weight than others. Anyone who has studied the Council's decision history can identify which ones without being told. 9 of the 12 seats are occupied when Anakin enters. The 3 empty seats belong to masters currently off-planet. He knows which 3 and where they are, a habit of information maintenance that has no specific application here, and that he keeps current regardless, because Kreia's fundamental instruction about knowledge applies. You do not know in advance which information will matter. Collect it all. Wait it later. Mace Windu sits at the chamber's dominant axis. His presence in the Force is substantial, a controlled, focused power that carries the specific quality of a man who has spent decades treating discipline as the primary form of self-expression. He looks at Anakin the way he looks at everything, as a tactical situation requiring immediate classification. Yoda occupies the seat to Windu's left. He is smaller than historical holos suggest, and stiller than anything that small and old has a right to be. His eyes, when they settle on Anakin, carry something that is not surprise. Nothing surprises Yoda. Or if it does, he has had 900 years to develop the patience that makes surprise and equanimity indistinguishable from the outside. What his eyes carry is recognition. Not of Anakin specifically, of the shape of the moment. "You are not Jedi," Windu says. His voice does not make this an accusation or a question. It is a classification, delivered flatly. "No," Anakin says. "You are Force-sensitive." Substantially, Windu's eyes narrow a fraction. "I felt you coming from the bridge approach and I could not identify your signature. That is not a small thing." "I know." "Who trained you?" "Someone who is no longer able to be trained by," Anakin says. "Kreia died 11 days ago." He does not say this. He does not say anything else about her. She was not his to offer to this room. Windu holds his gaze. "Why are you here?" Anakin reaches into his coat and removes a data drive, physical, not networked, containing a compressed copy of the map from the 61st level safe room, which Padmé spent 3 weeks helping him convert from paper into documented, source-referenced, legally structured evidence that would survive the scrutiny of a Senate tribunal. He holds it up. "Palpatine is Darth Sidious," he says. That drive contains 61 years of financial records, communication intercepts, and operational documentation connecting him to the separatist movement, the assassination of Sifo Dyas, the unauthorized commission of the clone army on Kamino, and the deliberate engineering of the Clone Wars as a manufactured crisis. He sets the drive on the floor between them since there is no table in this room. Another choice that says something. "I am informing you of this as a courtesy." The chamber is quiet in the specific way of spaces where multiple highly trained people are simultaneously exercising restraint. Windu speaks first. "This is council business now. You will stand down and let the Order handle." "The Order," Anakin says. "Let a Sith Lord run the Senate for a decade while you argued about prophecy. I'm not asking permission. I'm informing you. Out of courtesy you haven't earned." The restraint in the room tightens. He can feel it in the Force. 9 controlled reactions, each one a trained person choosing not to respond to what they just heard, because responding would confirm it landed. He did not say it to wound. He said it because it is the accurate description of the situation, and Kreia spent 8 years teaching him that accuracy, delivered without cruelty, is more useful than any version of the same truth softened for comfort. Windu's jaw shifts almost imperceptibly. "You don't walk into this chamber and tell us what the Order has, Master Windu." Yoda's voice is quiet, and it ends the sentence Windu was building with the completeness of a hand placed on a door. The small master's eyes have not moved from Anakin since he entered. "Sit down, please." Windu sits. The speed of it says something about what Yoda's voice actually means in this room, underneath the performed equality of the circular seats. Yoda looks at Anakin for a long moment. The Force around him is not simple, it is deep and stratified. 900 years of accumulated experience producing something that is less like a person's presence and more like a place's. A location that has absorbed so much of what has passed through it that it carries its own ambient weight. "Failed to see," the Council did, Yoda says. "Not because hidden, the danger was, but because look, we did not. At the parts of the galaxy inconvenient to our comfort." He pauses. Each pause Yoda takes is doing work. He has the quality of someone who has learned that silence communicates with precision that words can only approximate. A Sith Lord. In the Senate. Under our noses. For decades. And found by one young man, trained outside our walls, walking in at dawn to tell us what we should have known. He closes his eyes briefly. Embarrassing, this is. And necessary to say. The chamber absorbs this. Anakin watches the faces, 9 masters processing a recalibration that most of them will spend years completing. He does not experience this as victory. Victory implies the right opponent. This is not an opponent. This is an institution discovering the shape of its own blind spot from the inside, which is different and harder and more important. "The drive," Windu says, after a moment. His voice has changed, not diminished, but redirected. The force of it no longer pushing outward. You said it's source-referenced. Senate Tribunal Standard. Padmé Amidala spent 3 weeks on the legal architecture. It will survive any challenge Palpatine's allies attempt. Something moves across Windu's face. Amidala knows. She found me, Anakin says. 4 months ago. She had already identified the pattern independently. I gave her the documentation. She gave it structure. Windu looks at the drive on the floor. Then, at Anakin. The tactical assessment in his eyes has not diminished, but its direction has changed. He is no longer classifying a threat. He is classifying a situation that has already moved past the point where his classifications matter. We'll need to coordinate the arrest, Windu says. Joint operation, Jedi and Senate security. No, Anakin says. You cannot walk into Palpatine's office alone. His contingency planning accounts for Jedi involvement, Anakin says. The operational details on the drive include 3 separate fail-safe triggers he has prepared specifically for a Jedi-led arrest attempt. Traps, not defenses, designed to produce an incident that justifies emergency powers and accelerates his timeline, rather than ending it. He picks up the drive from the floor and crosses the chamber to place it in Windu's hands directly. Your role is the tribunal, the legal infrastructure, the Senate majority, the public record that makes what happens next stick. That is what the Order is positioned to do and what I am not. He holds Windu's gaze. Palpatine's office. Tonight alone. If you fail, Windu begins. Then you proceed with the tribunal using the drive and it takes longer and costs more, Anakin says. But I won't fail. He says it without performance. It is an assessment, not a boast, the same flat informational quality Kreia used for everything, which he has carried so long, it has become his own. He turns to leave. Young man, Yoda says. Anakin stops. Trained you. Who did? Truly, the old master's voice carries something that is not interrogation. It is closer to acknowledgement. Their mark. We see. In how you see. Anakin stands with his back to the chamber for a moment. Someone who believed, he says, that the question matters more than the answer. He walks out into the early light, down through the temple's 5,000-year wait, across the bridge approach, and into the city. He has one conversation left. The building is quiet at this hour. Not empty. The Republic's administrative apparatus does not fully empty. There are always night shift aides, security rotations, the low hum of systems that process the galaxy's governance without pause, but quiet in the way that large institutional spaces become quiet after business hours, a reduction of human density that makes the architecture more legible. The corridors show their proportions. The ceilings assert their height. The building, stripped of the people moving through it, becomes more purely what it was designed to be. It was designed to impress. Anakin walks through it without being impressed. He has been in this building 11 times over the past 4 years, including twice in this specific corridor on the executive level, including once inside this office. The meeting at 17, the afternoon light through the window, the tea he drank and the architecture he read, and the 3 seconds during which Palpatine almost made him feel seen. He knows the room. He knows the window placement, the desk position, the 2 points of secondary egress that are not marked on any public schematic, but are visible if you study the building's mechanical drawings, which are filed with the Coruscant Urban Infrastructure Authority under a permit reference from 40 years ago. He knows the man. The door is unlocked, which tells him the man knows he is coming. Palpatine is standing at the window. This is the same position he occupied at their first meeting, which is not coincidence, it is communication. He is telling Anakin that he has had time to prepare, that he chose this stance deliberately, that the intervening years have not changed the fundamental structure of what this room is supposed to be. He looks older than he did at 17. Not diminished, the distinction matters. The age sits on him like a layer added rather than something subtracted, an accretion of the years rather than erosion by them. His hands are folded behind his back. His bearing is exact. I wondered, Palpatine says without turning, when you would come to this. You've been wondering for 4 years, Anakin says moving into the room. More recently you've been certain, the procurement delays, Senator Dodd's mysterious political isolation, The Scipio accounts. He turns from the window. His face carries nothing performative. The warmth is gone. The cultivated investment. The careful architecture of approachability. What remains is considerably older and considerably more precise. You have been thorough. I want you to know I appreciate that. The people who come after me are usually not thorough. I'm not coming after you, Anakin says. I'm finishing something. A meaningful distinction, Palpatine says, that I suspect you believe. He crosses to the desk, not sitting, standing behind it, the surface between them a piece of furniture that is also a statement about territory, and looks at Anakin with the full quality of his attention, which is, stripped of the warmth and the performance, a substantial thing. The mind behind the eyes is old and precise, and has spent 6 decades thinking about power with the focused totality of a being for whom power is the only subject worth sustained consideration. I will tell you what I told your master, he says, though I suspect you have a different master than I've been able to identify. You don't know who trained me, Anakin says. No, Palpatine admits, and the admission costs him something fractional and visible. That has bothered me considerably. Everyone comes from somewhere. Every philosophy has a source. Yours has been untraceable, which suggests either a source I've somehow failed to surveil, or a source that predates my surveillance architecture entirely. He studies Anakin. The latter seems more likely now that I'm looking at you properly. You've been looking at me for 4 years. I've been watching you, he says. That is different. Tonight, I'm looking. He straightens. The galaxy requires a kind of strength the Republic cannot provide, and the Jedi will not. You know this. Whoever trained you taught you this. I can see the shape of the lesson even without knowing its source. The difference between us is not the diagnosis, it is the prescription. Your prescription, Anakin says, is yourself. 60 years of infrastructure, 2 sides of a manufactured war, an army with inhibitor chips already loaded, and a Senate so compromised it will vote its own authority away the moment you ask it to. That is not a prescription. That is a 60-year seizure of something that was never yours. The Republic was dying before I touched it, Palpatine says, and his voice carries the absolute conviction of a man who has made this argument to himself so many times it has become geology. Corrupt, calcified, incapable of the decisive action a galaxy of 1 trillion lives requires. I did not create its weakness. I inherited it and built something functional in the space its weakness provided. You built a throne in a burning building and called it architecture. Anakin says. The air in the room changes. Not dramatically. There is no visual indicator, no sound, no forced telegraph of the kind Kreia spent years training him to eliminate from his own movements. What changes is a quality of pressure, the atmosphere of the room reorganizing around a decision that has been made in the space behind Palpatine's eyes. The lightning comes from both hands simultaneously. Anakin has studied Force lightning from every available source, historical accounts, Jedi combat records, the 2 documented cases of its use in the past century. The accounts all emphasize speed and the difficulty of deflection. What the accounts do not adequately convey is the quality of it as a Force phenomenon, the way it is not simply electricity generated by a body, but the Force itself weaponized into a specific frequency of destruction, raw dark side energy given a conductive shape. He does not deflect it. He steps into it. This is not bravery. It is technique. The specific technique that has no name because it was developed by one person across 4,000 years of study and transmitted to one student across 8 years of training, in a place that is itself a monument to what happens when Force philosophy reaches its violent conclusions. Kreia called it, once, in the only moment she named it directly. Standing in the space the Force has not yet decided to occupy. It requires a quality of presence that is neither resistance nor surrender, not absorbing the lightning, not deflecting it, but existing at the precise frequency where the Force energy finds no surface to connect with, like a key finding no corresponding lock. The lightning reaches him and moves through the space he is occupying without finding him in it. He feels it. It is not painless. It is not meant to be painless. The technique is not about comfort. It is about function. And it functions. He keeps walking forward. Palpatine's expression, for the first time in any interaction Anakin has observed or experienced, becomes something unguarded. Not fear. Fear is too simple a word for a man whose emotional architecture is this complex and this old. What crosses his face is the specific quality of a person encountering the boundary of their own model of the possible. He increases the output. Anakin reaches the desk. He places one hand flat on its surface, and with the other he reaches, not physically. Not with the aggressive force grasp of a trained combatant, but with the specific surgical precision of a technique Kreia demonstrated once and only once, in the Traya's core, in the chamber where the force behaves differently, pressing her fingers against a stone and showing him what it looked like when the connection between a living thing and the force was separated at the point of contact, rather than suppressed or overwhelmed. Not a wound. A severance. Clean. Specific. Like a thread cut rather than frayed. The lightning stops. Palpatine's hands drop to his sides. He looks at them with the expression of a man listening for a sound he has heard every moment of his life and finding, for the first time, silence in its place. He reaches for the force the way a person reaches for a light switch in a familiar room. Nothing. The room is very quiet. He looks up at Anakin. Without the force, without the performance, without the 60-year architecture of cultivated menace and political construction, what remains is an old man behind a desk. Slight, the posture still exact, because posture is muscle memory and muscle memory persists longer than power. But slight, the room, designed to impress, is suddenly too large for what it contains. You can't, he starts. I just did, Anakin says. Palpatine's mouth closes. He is, Anakin observes, recalculating with the speed of someone whose mind has not diminished even as everything that fed it has been removed. The calculation does not take long, because a man who has spent 60 years anticipating every variable is very fast at identifying the variables he did not anticipate. Kill me then, Palpatine says. His voice is steady. Whatever else he is not a man who loses his composure at the end. If you've come this far, complete it. No, Anakin says. I am more dangerous alive. You are more dangerous dead, Anakin says. Dead, you become the thing you've been building toward for 60 years. A legend. A martyr for everyone who believed the galaxy needed what you were selling. Dead, your philosophy outlives your failure. He looks at the old man across the desk. Frail now. Precisely frail. The specific frailty of a thing that has been hollowed of what animated it. You spent 60 years building a story where you die a legend or rule as a god. I'm giving you neither. You get a cell, a number, and a trial. Let the galaxy watch you be ordinary. Palpatine looks at him for a long moment. Whoever trained you, he says quietly, was more dangerous than I accounted for. Yes, Anakin says. She was. He steps back from the desk. He reaches into his coat and removes a comlink. He keys the channel Padmé established for this moment. Senate security, tribunal authorized, the legal infrastructure she and the council have spent the past weeks building into a structure that will hold. He does not watch Palpatine's face while he waits for them to arrive. There is nothing more to learn from it, and he has Kreia's instruction on the subject of observation. Watch what is still moving. What has stopped moving has told you everything it has to say. He looks out the window instead. Coruscant below, perpetual and enormous, the city that has forgotten it has aground, carrying its trillion lives through another night without knowing that the shape of the next day has just changed. The comlink clicks. We're here, Padmé says. Third floor, Anakin says. Executive corridor. He's at the desk. A pause. Her voice, when it returns, carries the specific quality of someone holding something large very carefully. Is it done? Anakin looks at the window. At the city below. At the first gray suggestion of dawn beginning at the horizon's edge, the light that Coruscant's upper levels will see, and its lower levels won't. The daily reminder that the city has layers and not all of them receive the same sky. Yes, he says. Come up. He waits in the quiet room with the ordinary old man behind the desk, and does not feel triumphant, and does not feel relieved. and does not feel the specific complex of emotions that the moment seems designed to produce in whoever stands inside it. He feels the question Kreia asked him first, in the Dune Sea, at 9 years old, when she had just woken from 4,000 years of waiting and found him covered in engine grease. What are you when no one is watching and no doctrine is telling you what to be? He is still working on the answer. He thinks that is exactly right. The trial lasts 9 days. This is the first surprise, not that it happens, but that it is so short. 61 years of documented architecture, presented by Senator Amidala's legal team with the methodical precision of people who have spent weeks ensuring that every source reference survives challenge, produces a verdict that the tribunal reaches in 4 hours of deliberation. The speed is not a symptom of carelessness. It is a symptom of evidence so complete that argument against it requires inventing facts rather than disputing them, and the Senate, whatever its failures, still contains enough people who understand the difference. Palpatine sits through all 9 days in the defendant's chair with the exact posture of a man who has decided that if he cannot control the outcome, he will control his bearing within it. He makes no outbursts. He offers no testimony. He looks, for 9 days, precisely like what he is, an old man in a chair, waiting for a room full of people to finish deciding what to do with him. The verdict, when it comes, is read into the Senate record by a clerk with a flat administrative voice and no awareness of what she is reading. Guilty on 47 counts, the chamber receives it with the stunned, uneven quality of an institution that has just discovered the floor is lower than it thought it was. Anakin watches from the public gallery. He leaves before the applause starts. The Order's reckoning is quieter than the trial and considerably harder. Yoda calls it a convocation rather than a council session, which is a distinction that matters to the people inside it and means nothing to anyone outside. But the difference between a convocation and a council session is that a convocation has no votes, no formal resolutions, no mechanisms for the production of institutional decisions. It is simply masters in a room, talking honestly, without the structure that normally makes honest talk optional. Anakin is not present. He receives an account of it afterward from Obi-Wan Kenobi, who sought him out 3 days after the convocation with the specific quality of a man who has processed something large and needs to place it in conversation to be sure he has understood it correctly. They sit on the steps of the temple's outer garden in the early morning. Kenobi looks like someone who has slept recently but not enough, and carries the particular weight of a person whose framework for the world has been adjusted at the foundation. Yoda dissolved the military commission, Kenobi says, voluntarily, preemptively, before the Senate could legislate it. He said, he pauses, finding the words. He said the Order had confused proximity to power with responsibility for it, and that the confusion had made them useful to exactly the kind of people they existed to oppose. That's accurate, Anakin says. Yes, Kenobi agrees, without defensiveness. It is. He looks at his hands for a moment. He also said the Jedi spent so long believing they were guardians of the galaxy that they stopped being students of it. That a guardian who stops learning the thing they guard eventually guards only their own image of it. Anakin is quiet. The morning light is doing its limited work on the garden, reaching the flowers and the upper paths but stopping short of the deeper levels where the old trees create their own weather. The Order isn't disbanding, Kenobi says, but it's smaller, by choice, retreating from the Senate, from the military advisory role, from the committee appointments. He glances at Anakin. Going back to something older, Yoda said. Before the Republic needed them as an institution and they began needing the Republic to need them. That will be a difficult thing for a lot of them, Anakin says. Yes, Kenobi says simply. It already is. He pauses. Yoda asked me to tell you that the door of the temple is open. Not as an obligation, as an acknowledgement. Anakin nods once. He does not say whether he will walk through it. Kenobi, to his credit, does not ask. They sit in the morning quiet for a while longer, two people on the steps of an institution in the process of learning something expensive, and the garden does its patient work around them. The house on the lake is smaller than its reputation suggests. Padmé has been coming here since childhood, which means the scale of it in her memory is a child's scale, Rooms that seemed vast at 7 read as modest and exact at 26, proportioned for living rather than impressing. She finds she prefers the accurate version. Anakin arrives in the early afternoon, when the light on the water is doing the particular thing it does at this hour, flattening the surface into something that looks like hammered metal, the mountains behind it sharp and clear in the absence of heat haze. He stands at the dock for a moment before she comes out, and she watches him from the doorway, with the attention she brings to things worth understanding. He is not what she expected, when she thinks back to their first meeting in the Geonosis corridor. The figure she constructed from that encounter, and refined through 4 years of intermittent proximity before the 61st level safe room, resolved the outline into a complete picture. She expected someone carrying more weight visibly, the work he has been doing, the shape of it, the years of solitary attention applied to something enormous. That kind of effort usually leaves marks that read from the outside. He looks, standing at the dock in the afternoon light, like someone who slept last night. She walks out to meet him. Tatooine, he says, when she reaches him, which is how he indicates he went. He does not over-explain things. She has identified this as one of his more functional qualities. How is she? Good, he says. The word is simple and carries the specific weight of a simple word that has been waited for across a very long time. She has a house. She's been free for 3 years now. I arranged it before Geonosis, through the same channels I was using for the procurement work. She doesn't know it was me. A pause. She thinks a Senate relief program found her case. Padmé looks at him. She should know it was you. Maybe, he says. I'm going back in the spring. I'll tell her then. She accepts this. He will tell her, because he is not someone who indefinitely defers things that matter, and his mother matters in the specific, unguarded way that very little else does. She has seen the outline of it in the way he never talks about her gratuitously, which is how people carry things they intend to protect. They stand at the dock together for a while. The water does its hammered metal thing in the afternoon light. Something moves beneath the surface at the far end of the dock, unhurried. What are you going to do now? She asks. He is quiet for long enough that the question settles into the air and becomes comfortable there. I don't know, he says. That's the first time in 8 years that's been true, and I find I'm not troubled by it. She looks at him sideways. Most people find not knowing what comes next troubling. Most people, he says, have been told what comes next their whole lives, and accepted it. He looks at the water. I was told I was chosen, that the Force had authored something for me before I was old enough to author anything myself. I spent 8 years learning to put that down. The not knowing is what putting it down feels like. Padmé considers this for a moment. She taught you that? Your teacher? She taught me to ask the question that leads there, he says. The putting down was mine. She nods. The distinction is clear, and she respects it. There's work still, she says. The Senate. The reform architecture Palpatine's conviction opened up, the financial regulations, the oversight structures that should have existed 60 years ago and didn't. That work needs people who understand the system from inside the shadows as well as inside the chamber. I know, he says. I'm not asking you to commit to anything, she says. I'm telling you the work exists. I know that too. He turns from the water and looks at her with the full quality of his attention, which she has come to understand is not a small thing. There are people who look at you, and people who see you, and he is the second kind in a way that took her a while to locate because she is usually the one doing the seeing. Ask me in the spring, he says, when I've told my mother. She accepts this too. That evening, with the light gone from the lake and the mountains reduced to dark shapes against a sky full of more stars than Coruscant ever allows, Anakin sits outside alone. He is not meditating. He tried meditation once, in the 2nd year of training, and Kreia told him flatly that it was a Jedi technique for achieving a stillness they valued for its own sake. And that stillness valued for its own sake was indistinguishable from the apathy she had spent her life opposing. What he is doing is simpler. He is sitting. He is letting the night be the night without asking it to be anything else. He thinks about Kreia. Not with grief exactly. She was clear about grief, about what it costs and what it produces and whether the production justifies the cost. He thinks about her the way he thinks about Malachor itself, a place where something catastrophic happened that left the ground different. And the ground being different is not a damage to be repaired, but a fact to be known. And knowing it is how you walk on it without falling. She asked him, in their last real conversation, whether he was worth 4,000 years of waiting. He did not have an answer then. He thinks about the 9-day trial. The convocation in the temple garden. His mother's house on Tatooine, modest and real, with a door that opens from the inside. The map on 3 walls of a safe room that no longer needs to be a safe room. Padmé at the dock in the afternoon light, asking what comes next with the specific quality of someone who already knows the answer, will be worth waiting for. He is not the chosen one. He was never the chosen one. He is a man who was found in a desert by someone who asked him the right question, and trusted him to spend his life working toward the answer. The galaxy did not need a chosen one. The galaxy needed someone willing to do the work without the mythology, to dismantle the architecture of 60 years of patient evil with patience of his own, to stand in a room with the most dangerous man alive and choose a cell over a corpse, because the corpse would have meant something, and the cell means nothing, except the ordinary consequence of ordinary. Cruelty finally held to account. He looks at the stars. They are the same stars visible from the Dune Sea on Tatooine, from the gravity-broken sky of Malachor V, from the permanent artificial ceiling of Coruscant's lower levels. The same stars above every choice that led here. He breathes. He is 21 years old, and the story that was supposed to define him has been replaced by his own. And his own is still being written, and the not knowing what comes next feels clean, earned, like the correct texture of a life that belongs to the person living it. The lake moves in the dark below him. The stars hold their positions. Somewhere on this planet, a democracy is doing the difficult, imperfect, ongoing work of being a democracy without a shadow at its center, and the work is not finished and will not be finished, and that is not a failure. That is what it looks like when it's real. He closes his eyes, breathes out. The force moves through him like a current through still water, present, enormous, indifferent to prophecy. He lets it. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.